I'm going to read something to you because it's easiest for me to explain it that way. Just because I have so much that it's too hard for me to put it into, explain it right from the start to the end, because okay, so my name is Laureen LeClerc. I sent a message out last winter. In Alberta, we have a minister. His name's Dale Nally. He's the red tape, modernize the act minister. And modernize the act, there it is. So I'm going to just start from the beginning. And if I get kind of broken up, then it's because this is hard for me to do. And so I sent this out February 2nd of 2023 to a lot of people, ministers and Canada Post, everybody involved. But I've been sending out lots for a long time. And it says, good day, Dale, and all the rest of you honorable ministers. There is something within this email that probably applies to most of the acts you all have jurisdiction over. Not jurisdiction over the people, jurisdiction over the act. That is your role. If not, there might be some self-help information that may be of value to you. I was born and raised in Alberta. I was the first woman to complete first-year automotive mechanic at Fairview College and go on to complete second year as well. I graduated a journeyman automotive technician from Red Deer College in 1995. I did not receive the red dot because I am short 565 apprenticeship hours. Automotive mechanics troubleshoot and repair. Automotive technicians receive the troubleshoot from the computer and change non-rebuildable parts. I went on to be a Class 3 truck driver in 1997, which I upgraded to Class 1 in 2002 with a perfect mark of 0 errors. I hauled clay and gravel for road and lease construction, as well as fresh potable water for drilling and core rigs. I also worked in the agricultural industry, hauling grains and fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides, as well as operated the fertilizer floaters, herbicide, pesticide, high-rise sprayers. In 2004, my sister was in need of help to maintain her oil field administration business due to her failing kidney health since 1988, caused from lupus, and was being put on peritoneal dialysis. And greedy friends that she hired who felt it necessary to kick her while she was down, steal her contracts from her. I kind of have run-on sentences here. This is so hard for me to do. I wish people would just read it. It'd be a lot easier for me. So they were stealing her contracts from her. I spent 10 years until Rachel put everyone out of work. Rachel Notley, y'all know. Working for her as an assistant manager in a field office at Conklin on an oil sands exploration project on my ancestral land and natural resources that were sold leased to Norway, Statoil. A token Dene Indian had to be imported from La Loche, Saskatchewan to be the face of the local native content on the project. My sister, Marlene, spent 2 winters in the bush, hooked up to a machine every night to clean her blood for 12 hours and working for the other 12. The solution bags required for her to make this happen were delivered to the camp and came on a pallet that weighed a ton. There was at that time only one executive 12-room dorm, and most of us in that dorm had boxes of dialysis solutions stored in our closets. All of this had to be kept secret, or health and safety would have sent her home to try and survive on disability. After she lost her contract with Statoil in 2015, she went back to working in a bar and is now a security guard for security companies who also subcontract to Paladin Security. 。. . 。. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . I gave Arlene a kidney through the Real Living Donor Program, not the opt-out to be a cadaver donor while you are still living and hope that you are in fact a cadaver when the organs are harvested on May 2nd, 2006, and was ready to leave the hospital on May 3rd. Because the nurses were pushing morphine on me and I had to make a deal with Dr. Todd that if I went without asking for pain medication for another 24 hours, he would clear me to go home the next day. I left the hospital on the 4th. Arlene was not so lucky. Her kidney, after being frozen, began working as soon as her blood was flowing through it, and she began producing urine for the first time in over 2 years. Protocol said the dialysis shunt had to remain in her stomach in case of rejection to the kidney. Then they wouldn't have to put another one in. She woke up a day or so after the transplant to find the lid to the shunt laying on the bed. There were only 2 pair of hands that were ever supposed to touch that shunt, hers and mine, because I went through the dialysis training with her, and I never once laid hands on it. Whether in hospital or not, no one was supposed to touch that shunt. So how did the lid come off? The shunt lid required 2 or 3 full revolutions before locking. Arlene left it locked. She became ill, peritonitis, nearly died, and had to spend about 2 weeks in hospital recovering from the infection. I was livid because I've always questioned the reject the kidney narrative. Arlene and I are known as 25% gene match, meaning 75% of our genes are the same. Only identical twins have a closer gene match. Any anti-rejection drugs, even though she takes the lowest of doses, are causing deterioration in the rest of her body. But her kidney is fine. Lupus is in remission. Maybe they shouldn't have frozen and killed the kidney first. And what did they do with the kidney when the University of Alberta Hospital was the custodian of the kidney in the beer cooler? Exact words of Dr. Todd when Arlene asked her, "Where's my kidney?" When he told her, "My surgery went fine prior to her surgery." I asked what they did. Sorry. I asked what they did with the kidney because Arlene was the first lupus patient in Alberta to display all 12 symptoms of systemic lupus. You got to know they wanted to experiment and study her, and quite a few years after the transplant, they kept asking if they could do a biopsy. On her kidney, which is poke a hole into it. Was the reason they wanted to do a follow-up biopsy was because they poked a hole in it when they were the custodians of it while it was in the beer cooler? I do not put anything past these white-coated gods in their own minds. We give the orders, doctors. About a year after the transplant, I and a number of other living donors were presented with a four glass coasters with the words gratitude, inspiration, generous, and honorable etched on them. I've always had a hard time with them and was not comfortable receiving them. Gratitude, because it is I who is grateful that I was able to help my family. Jesus, this is so hard. Inspiration, because my older siblings were my inspiration growing up and who are the most responsible for raising me because mom and dad were working for the paper crown. Generous, because I've always been sure that anyone would do the same were they in the position to do so. And honorable, I have never looked the word up, but to me it means to be honest, and it troubles me deeply that there's such a lack of honesty in the world that can be recognized by others to the point where it warrants mentioning, or worse than that, censoring. For fuck's sakes. The glass coasters have always been placed in front of the one-eyed monster, the one television in our home, and reminds me to listen to my intuition and not the monster, which has now become a surveillance mechanism, as well as the mind manipulating social distancing tool it was invented for. It was the radio before that, anything to social distance people when they are together. The only monster that exists are the psychopathic corporate monsters. My psychological health was evaluated prior to transplant, as well as in 1989 when I was young in Grand Prairie, shortly after leaving the father of my 2-year-old child, and when I was told the only thing I had to worry about was my honesty because the world is not an honest place. I didn't believe him at the time, but I certainly do now. It has been 2 years since my suspension by Canada Post from a temporary full-time position in the hamlet of Alder Flats, where I live, for not covering my face on December 30th, 2020. Reported to the snitch line on December 24th, 2020 by a teacher. Scott Clark, my Canada Post local area supervisor, told me that Alberta Human Rights Act did not apply to me when I was on the Queen's sovereign ground. If anyone is wondering why the natives are always fighting with the government, it is because they're all on Crown land. Provincial human rights do not apply. Think about that, people. That's a pretty big swath of land in just Alberta alone. That the Alberta Human Rights Act does not apply to the people of Alberta while on Crown land. If this is legally true, then we have no provincial human rights as soon as we get in a vehicle and put that vehicle on the road, and neither do our children. It was my the word human, I'll get to that later. It was my Canada Post colleagues and Wetaskiwin Public School Board, Alder Flats Elementary School staff who committed mischief when I was falsely reported for disturbing the peace on January 7th, 2021. An RCMP officer reported that was a report that was closed by Constable T. SENFT as unfounded due to the fact that after investigation, there was no evidence to support the accusations of harassing Canada Post customers to remove their masks, and that I entered the post office that day and was asked to leave. That is because I was protesting by myself across the street on the sidewalk that my tax dollar paid for. The RCMP eyed me through the PROS system using a license plate that was registered to my husband. RCMP refused to charge these people with mischief because there was no intent to cause mischief. And if they charged everyone who made a false report to the police of mischief, people would quit calling them. According to Sergeant Dwayne Moore, so the policy is red tape removed, believed it to be true at the time. If the report is coming from someone who believed it to be true at the time, then there was no intent for mischief. And the RCMP continued to answer to the beck and call of the squeaky wheels, believing in and repeating, or worse yet, starting malicious lies and rumors to report to the RCMP, wasting their time investigating rumors rather than investigating the real criminals like themselves, government bureaucrats, big pharma, the family of corrupt lawyers, privately owned Alberta college corporations that control our health professionals' licenses, and apparently the Alberta Health Service Corporation as well, which in turn controls the Government Alberta Service Corporation. Excuse me. Believed it to be true at the time is the same as believing one's own lie, also known as compulsive lying, as well as being the personality trait of a narcissist. Narcissists are also known to be psychopaths and usually aspire to be the CEOs of corporations because they aim to control others. I see you all have aspirations of being at the top of the corporation. Keep in mind, I'm speaking to a whole bunch of our highest pay grade thinkers in our province. I was protesting against the personal order made by Principal Lotso for children to wear masks outside while they played soccer. Jason Kenney's own words, summer of 2021, there have never been any mask orders outdoors, but I knew what the public health orders said when they first came out, because anyone ordering me or anyone else as to what I have to do with my body, my home, my freedom or try to tell me to enforce such violations upon others better have the right to do so. The public health orders were the minimum that had to be followed, and organizational corporate policy could implement orders over and above public health orders. The snitch line was operational only to report those who were adhering to the minimum. There were no people who were not adhering to the minimum. There were no safeguards within the public health orders to report the abuses upon the people with the use of the over and above the public health orders corporation implemented policies. There was also no number to select on the phone number that the RCMP would give you if you called them to report any such corporate violations of the Alberta Human Rights Act. I do not, and I have not covered my face for COVID because the public health orders and the Alberta Human Rights Act stated that I could not be discriminated against for not doing so. I will get back to the legal misuse and malfeasance around the use of the word human to identify we the people as a natural resource, and that includes all of you also. On January 11th, 2021, I brewed some bearberry tea given to me by a community member who I thought was my friend, also known by the natives as kinnick tea or bearberry tea, unbeknownst to me at the time, a diuretic and a hallucinogenic. 4 days later, delusional due to dehydration and the hallucinogenic tea. Yes, I drank it for 4 days and felt like I was experiencing a vision more than a delusion. My family members were concerned. My daughter called the mental health line in Drayton Valley from Gibsons, BC, and was advised to call 911 to have the RCMP do a wellness check. It was my nephew who lives across the street from us who called 911. T-Senft, again, SENFT, was also one of the RCMP who responded to the Mental Health Act occurrence also, and identified me to the EMS as having been suffering from violent delusional behavior since the day at the school. But he did not, however, issue a Form 10 to have me involuntarily admitted under the Mental Health Act, as I was willing to go with EMS. I consented to having an IV by the paramedic. He then began pressuring me to put a mask on, along with body autonomy and right to informed consent. I have a fear of suffocation, not a mental disorder. I do not understand why everyone doesn't have a fear of suffocation. People can live for quite a while without food, 3 or so days without water, and mere minutes without oxygen. And the re-inhalation of our CO2 starves our brains of oxygen, amongst other problems. I do not need a health professional's opinion on the matter, as I live my life by intuition, not voices in my head, common sense and critical problem solving thinking. As well, there is not one health professional on the face of the earth that knows my body better than me. Health professionals claim to know the human body, and one is no different than the other. My lack of compliance to the mask warranted me being drugged with the euthanasia drug midazolam and physically restrained to get the mask on my face. I woke a few minutes later from contraindications of the drug and began struggling to get the mask off my face. I was drugged again because now I'm displaying violent behavior, and a life pack had to be used on me after this drugging. Still restrained. I willingly left my home on the afternoon of January 15th, 2021, and by 1:16 a.m. on January 16th, 2021, I was involuntarily admitted through the use of Form 1 admission certificate stating that I had to be apprehended, trying to get out, and displaying violent behavior and possible domestic abuse, suicidal and homicidal thoughts, naked and spelling capital C, capital A, capital P, capital I, capital A, capital P, and capital T. Fuck, anyways, capital. My memories are sketchy for the next 4 days until my daughter, acting as my next of kin from BC, refused any more drugs for me. of which there were many, including my dad's lamb Versed in emergency. My husband was being accused by hospital staff as having been the one who had me committed. He would not be acting as my next of kin. There was no one else to blame for me having been committed. The RCMP, whose job it was to make that medical assessment, as if, said I went willingly. No need for the regulatory Form 10 required. RCMP Constable Senft was, however, able to provide some juicy small town lies and gossip, as believed it to be true at the time, facts communicated by others as information required on the Form 1 admission certificates. A CT scan, a chest x-ray, my dad's lamb slows the breathing, were performed. An emergency exception to consent was issued to perform a lumbar puncture to test me for a stroke or encephalitis, neither of which I was displaying symptoms of. The lumbar puncture was unsuccessful. I believe it was because the sedation wouldn't take due to the midazolam and other drugs. Like my friend Chris said, it was them that brought the drugs to the party. It's not very funny, but I've done some partying. I hadn't taken any drugs, and Billy said I wasn't even smoking weed. An emergency MRI was ordered, and thankfully someone pointed out that I have pins in my ankle, and the MRI was scrapped. I was raped with the PCR and MRSA swabs while restrained, head thrashing, and according to the medical records. Was I gang raped, one holding my head while the other raped, or was it just one rapist who tried hitting the hole while my head was thrashing? Anything placed in any orifice of my body without my consent is rape. Blood was taken when I did not have a hospital ID on my body. I was raped with an in-out catheter at 9:30 a.m., January 16th, 2021, after the admission certificates to retrieve the 512 milliliters of urine from my bladder, as I was not able to provide a urine sample for toxicology screen because it is suspected that I suffer from delirium, most likely caused from alcohol and substance abuse. The reason I cannot provide the urine sample is that not only was I still in 4-point restraints trying to pee on a bedpan. You can picture that. But that 512 milliliters of urine is the only fluids I had produced since leaving my home the day before. Still dehydrated, and according to the discharge summary, 6 weeks after admission certificate cancellation and discharge on January 25th, 2021. Dehydration was in question as to the cause of delirium upon arrival to ER. I left the hospital still in a state of dehydration. It took me days to rehydrate myself as I was refused electrolytes and given only chlorinated water and ginger ale to hydrate myself with in the hospital. I don't have any electrolytes. I was here was the answer when I requested some, but we can treat your dehydration-induced delirium with psych meds, and we can't provide you with darkness and quiet so you can sleep, but we can give you a sleeping pill. My sister was with Billy when they picked me up and immediately recognized the dehydration in me. We are professionals on keeping our kidneys hydrated, and it took me days to rehydrate. My family did not find out that I was being held under the Mental Health Act until I told them on January 19th, the day I found out and was refused paper proof. I did not receive that until January 23rd, 2021, both of which I or my family had the legal right to be informed of and receive copies of within the first 24 hours of involuntary admission. And only after I had been coerced into consenting to an EEG that I knew I did not need and which caused me extreme brain pain, and more routine blood work, which I later found out after receipt of the records, was to test me for syphilis, also displaying no symptoms of. Alberta had been experiencing an epidemic of syphilis at the time, probably still is, with documented congenital syphilis stillborns. Any of you hear about that? I find the syphilis test extremely offensive and implying that my husband or I have been unfaithful to each other. I was also treated for herpes, but not tested for herpes, nor have I ever been diagnosed as having herpes. The drug was used to treat me for herpes, which also came with a contraindication that warranted continued physical restraints. On January 17th, I remember waking up and leaving my room on the geriatric ward. I was walking past the room where an old man was sitting on his bed. He smiled and said, "Good morning." He said, "Please love me." It broke my heart because I knew these people are being neglected and left to die and see only masks. I entered his room, put my hand on his chest, kissed him on the forehead, and told him that I have always loved him. He smiled and touched my hand, and I left and sat in a chair in the hallway. The masked Nazis, peace officers, came and took me back to my room and told me I had to stay in my room if I was not going to wear a mask. Later on that day, I was in my private room by myself, leaning on the window ledge, when 2 peace officers and 3 nurses entered my room and ordered me to go to bed. Go to my bed. I told them I don't have to go to my bed. The bed was repositioned in front of me and had me corralled in the room. All 5 of the masked gangsters approached me and began trying to pull me onto the bed. I planted myself and they could not budge me. So one of the peace officers used a mandible pressure point maneuver, also known as pain-assisted compliance, according to the peace officer's supervisor, on me to scream in pain and collapse. I was then drugged in the left deltoid with a needle shoved so brutally into my arm that it left a 3-inch bruise and placed in 4-point restraints with a mask on my face. I managed to get one of the hands loose and get the mask off my face. I was undoing the rest of the restraints when a nurse who was mapping my behavior in a chair at the door, scrolling on her phone, most likely on social media, realized I was undoing the restraints and called for help. The gangsters returned, brutally drugged me again on the right in the right thigh, also leaving a huge bruise, reapplied the restraints and mask, and I woke up the next morning with a diaper on my ass too. I had to negotiate my right to use the bathroom and not to have to lay there and piss myself, which the nurse suggested, just use the wet pad. These fucking people. Initially, when I told her I needed to go to the bathroom, it's no surprise to me that the psychiatrist that finally came to my room on the 20th had no interest in seeing the bruises or discussing the assault. After I had asked him, "Where's the rest of your team?" We had to talk. I think I might have missed something. Did I? Oh, fuck. We had to talk about the things that he wanted to talk about, like, do you hear voices? My reply, anyone who isn't listening to their moral conscience is failing miserably. He hung his masked face. He asked if I had thoughts of suicide. I laughed and told him suicide is legal in Canada. He was offended and tried to explain the difference between suicide and MAID. I cut him short and told him suicide is selfish. As for his question as to whether I have homicidal thoughts, I told him no, I don't even kill spiders and ants. It took only a year for the Canadian health system to start offering MAID as a form of health care. Apparently in Saskatchewan, when calling the Saskatchewan Healthcare Office, Maid service is 5 on the please listen to the following selection to choose from. Automated machine response that answers the phone. Veterans who served their country are far from selfish. So obviously these people are being neglected to the point that they would rather die than go on living. Canada leads the world in maid deaths and organ harvesting from maid deaths. I think it was about 2013 that I read Canada was one of the best countries in the world to live in. And now 10 years later, Canada is the best country to die in. And are you all okay with that? Early in September 2021, Billy cut the tip of his finger off while splitting wood. I took him to Drayton Valley Hospital, dreading the mask interaction I knew we would surely come up against. An AHS sign on the outer door said, physical distancing works. Stay 2 meters apart. I felt relieved, and then we stepped in. The inner door was locked and had a handmade Word document sign that said, masks are required by all patients and visitors. A masked security guard let us in, and then starting pushing the mask. I won't be accosted in this way again. And I went outside to wait. Billy came out a few minutes later, hand bleeding, with the masked Nazi standing at the door yelling, it's your choice, at him. Wear the mask or you don't get health care is not a choice. It's medical coercion. We went home. I cleaned the wound with salt water and antibiotic salve, bandaged his finger, and this was a Friday. On Sunday morning, we took the bandage off to clean the wound. I could see bone, so I told him he had to get it looked at. He went to the Rimby Hospital, submitted to the coercion because I was afraid of bone infection. Filed a formal complaint, which I did not receive a written response to, only verbal. I was told the security guard would not lose her job, but was spoken to about her behavior and told to offer people a face shield. I told her that the public health orders say that face shields do not replace face masks, and a face shield should be used with physical distancing. She replied that she didn't know that, and I said, yeah, that's your problem. You don't know that. In March, a young mother friend of mine went to DV Hospital because her old dog had bitten her 11-month-old daughter on the head. And yes, the same masked Nazi attempted to accost her also. She does not cover her face because her child's mental health and development is more of a concern for her than catching the flu or a cold. And this young mother breastfeeds, not chest feeds, her child, providing all the natural immunity the child's body needs. According to the mother, this masked Nazi, Paladin Security, was trying to defend herself by saying these orders come from upstairs. Corporate, over and above the public health orders, policy health orders. And whose fault is that? I've spent the last 2 years trying to obtain the documents that are being withheld from me, full disclosure of both RCMP occurrences, which was communicated to me through an electronic device, my cell phone. According to the information on the Mental Health Act RCMP occurrence, it is I who believe people are communicating to me through my electronic devices. By RCMP Ombudsman Rob Russo, I now know that he's a federal privacy commissioner, investigator, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, Rob Russo, that if the information that I am requesting implies misconduct or officer blank. I forgot the other word he used because you don't always get a paper response to a report made to the RCMP or any response at all for that matter. RCMP Sergeant Dwayne Moore. He's out of Breton. And I would have to go to court ordered disclosure if I wanted that information. And he told me that I could take what I want from the conversation. And I'm still waiting for that investigation to be completed. Oh my goodness, this is so fucking painful. I have also have a request for the 13 pages withheld of the 26-page document from mental health link call to patient handover to ER Misericordia and this would include the RCMP report also. This file is now being accepted for inquiry. And Diane McLeod and some of these, they passed my privacy report request around between so many people that some of these names, that's the most redundant. There's so much money being wasted there. Diane McLeod is the adjudicator. I have a request for the video and audio footage of the camera in the patient compartment of the ambulance. And apparently, according to his supervisor, the video and audio recording of the paramedic told me was on and was to get me to comply with the mask. So he was lying to me. And a man who has my life in his hands is lying to me, and I'm supposed to accept what he says as professional and maintain trust in the EMS system. The video does not record. The monitor is in the driver's compartment for practitioner and patient safety. I don't know what is safe for anyone in the vehicle if the driver is committing distracted driving, watching a monitor, much like RCMP officers committing distracted driving, punching people's license plate numbers into the PRO system on a laptop computer while they're driving. Carmen Mann is the adjudicator, and this file has been in adjudication since August 26, 2022. Alberta Health Services has recently had to hire outside legal counsel due to resource attrition to deal with me. And the first file, the request for the video. I'm the one woman who, how many lawyers does Alberta Health Services Privacy Commissioner's Office have that I am paying for, yet I still have to pay for outside legal counsel for AHS, and I can't afford my own. I also have a request to Covenant Health to correct the gross negligent errors on the discharge summary in reference to my medical history, which was obtained by asking a drugged, delirious woman who it has been established is a poor historian in my current state, with the help from an AHS nephrologist, kidney specialist, who does not know left from right, but knows how to use a pen well enough to write the words, and then the he said, she said communications by others, and they all keep rewriting he said, she said. It's all believed to be true at the time and exaggerating it just a little. You see, I had a whole team of doctors. The corrections requested have been refused by Covenant House, and refusal has been okayed by the Privacy Commissioner's Office and refused for Inquiry House and by Diane McLeod on a technicality. The other request to Covenant House is a 24-hour nursing assessment record booklet from January 19th, 7 a.m. to January 20th, 7 a.m. that I did not receive with the rest of the medical records. Apparently, the records did exist, but could have been misfiled, misplaced, or in another patient's records, or sent to confidential shredding. Did is past tense. Someone better explain to me why I am paying for the confidential shredding of my health records, or anyone else's for that matter. I submitted the refusal for the corrections as supporting documents for my recent submittal to request an inquiry into the missing nursing assessment records. One of the responses from Covenant House is it is rare occurrence to be unable to locate a record. My response to the adjudicator was, the rare occurrence is to have a suicidal, homicidal, domestic abuse offending, substance abusing, involuntary mental patient who can read and get this far in the process without legal counsel. An indoctrination failure to boot, grade 10. This file has just been recently been accepted for inquiry by Diane McLeod as the adjudicator. If Diane McLeod thinks that this gross intentional written errors on my medical records could cause me no more harm than embarrassment to me should the wrong person read them, do you think I will get a fair, unbiased ruling from this woman on my medical records that have been confidentially shredded because the Act says the custodian can confidentially shred people's private medical information that documents the medical care or lack thereof that those people are paying for? My request to have a face-to-face meeting with my team of doctors to discuss the reasons for their decisions and documented comments was responded with, yes, we could make that happen, but the doctors would all have their own legal counsel present. What does that say about confidence in their own professional decisions? The time extensions taken and granted in this process are nothing short of ludicrous. We need 365 days or more to get done what should be done in the 30 or 90 days the Act says it can be done in, pushing the generic one answer fits all paper, that is. Or hand the file off to someone else who also needs a time extension because we don't know how to deal with someone who uses our process, our words against us. And why will this woman not stop? People usually give up trying to deal with our bullshit within the first year of, no, you can't have that. We need to hire outside legal counsel, raise the taxes. I have no fear of dying suddenly from unknown causes or of coincidence because I haven't taken part in the mRNA gene therapy injection experiment. My health is good and I take no medications. But at the speed these people work, I'm going to die of old age before they get it done. They got it done finally this fall. No, you can't have that. This is probably a good time to mention the paper crown printer. The Privacy Commissioner's office is full of paper pushers. They attempt to baffle with legalese bullshit and use as much paper as possible to do so. I have a 4-inch binder that is full and starting on a new one. Some of this, of course, is paper that I had to print to show that I know how to push paper too. The difference in my paper and theirs is they use Paper Crown's printer and I have to provide my own paper and ink, although I pay for both, and my paper has valid documented data to back it up. Arguments, they have the act to back up documented data to back up arguments, and they have the act to back up theirs. Now I'm speaking to Dale Nally. Dale, why do people have to pay the Alberta Government Service Corporation to be able to read the acts that you all claim are what you use to govern us with? Y'all do whatever you want to say, whatever you want to say and write it into the law. Y'all do whatever you want to do, say whatever you want to say, and write it into law that can be punished by yourselves. If the people don't believe that your bullshit is actually legal, then the people can pay to use the paper ground printer to read the act that you know the people are not educated enough to comprehend because the Government of Alberta Service Corporation does not provide people with a foreign legalese language education that is required, so we don't have to remain ignorant of the law, which apparently is no excuse for breaking the law. The Government of Alberta Service Corporation doesn't provide the education required to read, write, or count. Average reading comprehension level of people between the ages of 16 and 45 is grade 6. Cursive writing, spelling have been eliminated. And I watched a young lady about 18 or 19 use her cell phone calculator to figure out the change from a $20 bill for a $16 purchase at a garage sale. It was either the cell phone calculator or she would have had to taken off her socks and shoes to be able to count that out. But then she may not have gotten her shoes back on because we don't teach kids how to tie their shoes, tell time on a face clock, build a fire, use a sharp knife, prepare a meal, use a thread and needle, or tools of any kind for that matter. And we certainly do not teach them to think for themselves. How far are we going to go with this ignorantization of our children? Yeah, I know this is not a recognized word, but neither are what the fucks and emojis, but that is what people are using for written communication now. Excuse me. I received from Jill Clayton, Privacy Commissioner, a response to all 4 of these requests for review on the same day in 4 different envelopes, all dated November 12th, 2021, all stating the file will not be actively worked on. She then distributed them amongst 4 different members of the staff to work on individually, as though they do not all pertain to one woman, one incident, one set of medical records, all within the same 10-day period. I can tell you why this office is so far behind in their work. And it's no surprise why the judicial system, is so backed up, if this is how the rest of it works. Jill Clayton could have given all 4 of my requests to one chief, privacy commissioner, privacy officer, which then could have went to one adjudicator. Like I told the privacy commissioner's office, they all must be union workers. There's never any effort to complete the work. Therefore, the work never gets done. There is always work to do. Extra time is needed to get it done. And the excuse as to why the work is not getting done, well, because they're so busy. The following statement about the following statement about the Alberta Personal Information Act off the paper crown printer website. The only information I can get for free is copied below, and it's all I need to argue my point. Where does the balances and rights of individuals come into effect? Oh, that's right. Individual is a legal term that applies to legally numbered humans. That has nothing to do with people and everything to do with the corporation's needs and reasonable purposes. If my private medical information was being used for reasonable purposes, then there should be no reason why my private medical information cannot be disclosed to me. And anything that is being withheld from me is being withheld to cover for a crime. The Privacy Commissioner's Office allowing the public bodies to withhold these documents when clear evidence has been given by a man or woman of crimes committed against their own living bodies as to why the public bodies would withhold documents is accessory to those crimes, complicit and culpable. Technicality, word manipulation in the act just doesn't cut it when a clear and obvious crime or 10 have been committed upon a man or a woman's body, mind, and reputation. And this is what it says for the Privacy Commissioners Act. It protects personal information that is collected, used, or disclosed by private sector organizations in the province, balances the rights of individuals and the needs of organizations to collect, use, and disclose personal information for reasonable purposes. On December 7th, 2021, Billy took me to Rimby Hospital with stomach pains under extreme stress. Looking back, maybe experiencing flashback visions from the bearberry tea also. X-rays were taken of my stomach, and the nurse pulled a needle out of her pocket in the X-ray lab, asked if she could steal some blood, her exact words. I let her take it, but I did not have an hospital ID on. I was given Ativan to relax me, as I had not been sleeping well, which caused a contraindication known and documented on medical records from January 2021. The doctor who never examined me sat in her office and wrote up the first admission certificate without telling me or Billy, who rode in the ambulance with me, because I had made him promise to never put me in an ambulance ever again. While being transferred to Centennial Center, Anoka. Immediately upon arrival, I was put into 24-hour solitary confinement, ordered by the doctor in Rimby for wandering into patients' rooms and trying to get them to take their masks off. Patients were not wearing masks, only staff were wearing masks. I was drugged with 3 highly addictive psych meds and kept in that room for 6 days. The room had a commode chair, plastic urinal, a sheeted rubber mattress on the floor, a pillow, a weighted blanket, and a comforter that I had to use to clean up the diarrhea caused from the drugs that I was not able to wake up from and get my bearings in time to get to the commode chair. So I grabbed the plastic urinal and attempted to use that. The nurse took the comforter when they brought my next meal to serve to me on the floor, but I don't remember them washing the floor. I do remember that it was the 3rd day before I was taken to the bathroom, across the hall for the first time to wash my face and my hands, brush my teeth, and brush my hair. My husband was told for 6 days that he could not speak to me and that I had not signed a release form allowing him any information on me. I was given the admission certificates on the fourth day without glasses to read them. And when they did let me out, I was allowed myself. I called Billy to chew him a new ask and asked for a divorce for letting this happen to me again. I was released 3 days later after Billy was given the number of my social worker and left a message on her phone the morning prior to coming to see me, chewing her ass out for having been lied to by the staff and for the conditions I was kept in. I met the social worker later on for the first time that morning when I had to go for my daily visit with the quack in his rider. I asked her who she was, and she told me her name and said, "I'm your social worker." I replied, "I have a social worker?" I was released that morning when Billy got there. 9 days in total. And as for that bed and bathroom, 3 meals a day and care, that Centennial charged my personal health care number. I did not have a bed. I do not consider being fed on the floor a meal. It's food and barely that. I voiced my opinion of the mystery meatballs. Oh, they thought mystery meatballs was funny. As for the care, well, you were able to picture it as you read it. Do you feel cared for? 6 days of torture, medical fraud, extortion, defamation of character is what that is, and identity theft. Like my Canada Post prepaid visa that went missing from my wallet. There was no money on it, only my name. And the complaint was not taken seriously because there was no money on it. I have the list of contents for my wallet that has the card on the list. And I remember someone bringing me the list shortly after I arrived and to confirm if that was what was in my wallet after they gave me drugs. I remember telling me I don't have a Canada Post visa. So they stole my name. And why did they rummage through my wallet? And list of contents, they did not make list of any of my other personal belongings they had locked up and that every staff member had a key to. When I was gathering costs for evidence of how much was charged to my healthcare number, I was told by an AHS employee, "You don't pay for any of that. It's free healthcare." I don't know. I'm feeling like I paid a pretty high price in more ways than just the extortion against my healthcare number. Rather than confirm my identity with a hospital ID wristband, the notes state that I can be identified by a rose tattoo on my right shoulder. I don't know where this information came from or why hospital staff would write such a thing. The tattoo has not been recognizable as a rose for about 20 years now. It's nothing but 4 green dots that used to be leaves. But if one is going to steal my name, then a legally documented body identifier such as a rose tattoo on the real Laureen LeClerc relieves any imposters of being charged with criminal activity in my name, doesn't it? And so here we go. So this is kind of out there, but this really did happen. In the summer of 1989, the rodeo clown that I was living with and I signed up with the Oregon Narcotics Enforcement Agency in Boise, Idaho to work as undercover narcotics officers. We came back to Alberta and we're going to move to Oregon in the fall to begin our new jobs. My dad, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking when I was still a weed smoker, but excuse my language. I had no intention of quitting at that time either. We came back to Alberta and we're going to go back to Oregon in the fall. My dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passed away that fall, and we never went back to Oregon. My rose tattoo was brand new then, and I carried my ONEA, Oregon Narcotics Enforcement Agency ID card for years. I don't know whatever happened to it. Just prior to going to Rimbey Hospital, I awoke one night being told to go to see Elaine, another Native woman who lives across the road. And while there, I seen the fingerprint of my left hand baby finger on an unsolved crime show she was watching. I said to her, "That's my fingerprint, recognizable to me because of the scar." According to the show, this unusual, assumed to be fake fingerprint has been used in a number of crimes across the United States and Canada. And I told her about the ONEA. There isn't any of this that I can't prove, but this late night visit was said to be wandering from home. This can be the only explanation I have for the rose tattoo being a body identifier on legal documents of any kind. Okay, now I'm going to go back. The statement I made to the bunch of goons, and by bunch, I mean at times up to 6 peace officers, doctors, nurses, to laugh at my answers in my drugged, incoherent state and watch me eat on the floor was, "You people are treating me like a dog," which was written so as to sound as though I was hallucinating. I was a dog. I also now have a history of abusing my family members on these medical records. I have a 6-week supply of three highly addictive psych meds to cure me of my violent marijuana addiction. I still have the prescription as evidence, and I grow my own marijuana. No herbicides like those that are the regulation required in the government issue weed. It's not legal weed that's the problem, truly, people. It's the fucking whatever it is they're putting in it. Okay, well, medical marijuana and the government issue. I don't like it. It makes my head hurt. There's something in it. Full of FDA and Health Canada approved toxins, as in the food, the water, the air, on our bodies. We have materials that we wear that come with cancer warnings. If people are having psychotic episodes from smoking weed, then it is because of the required regulated toxins in the weed. Speaking of toxins, all those washable homemade masks that people were supposed to wash by hand in a mild soap and water and air dry. Don't you think they probably just dried them in the dryer with the fabric softener sheet and then put that on their face to breathe in? I did many times, because I don't use toxic petroleum product cleaners and soaps, and certainly not the fabric sheets. But since I quit using these types of products, I have become very sensitive to them, not allergic. The odors from these products in the grocery store aisles, and quite often in the air from my neighbor's dryers, are an assault on my olfactory senses. I kind of skip around here because it's too much. While in Pinoco, my fellow inmates told me of a man who drank the hand sanitizer that has been sitting on every table, every counter, everywhere for 3 years now. Keep in mind, people, I wrote this a year ago and died. Who is responsible for this man's death? Who is responsible for the poisoning of the children with this toxin? 8 milliliters will kill an adult. People have been bathing themselves and their children with this shit for 3 years now. Literally. I seen a young woman in independent grocers washing her face, washing her arms, her chest. Why is there young adults who do not know that our skin can absorb these products? And if this young lady knew, but was so terrified of the COVID that she would poison herself to protect herself, well, maybe we should look at what is really scaring people. Fear in emergency and fear in emergency. My mom always said there is nothing to fear but fear itself. The fear pushers certainly know this. More egregious than this young lady being scared is what if her body has become tolerant to the constant use of this toxic substance, and she is now addicted, and to bathe herself in free everywhere you'll look to keep people safe, still to this day, is how she gets her isopropyl fix. MP Mike Lake. I addressed this issue of isopropyl poisoning last September in that registered letter. Remember that photo of the empty isopropyl tote that came from a storage yard where there were hundreds of isopropyl food grade totes? Rainwater that, unless you have a use for it is apparently illegal to gather. The government owns the rain. Now you can think theory chemtrail shit. I learned about cloud seeding in grade 7. I was required to read 2 short stories called The Rainmaker, a story about a man who made it rain during a time of drought using silver iodide. Cloud seeding is known today as weather modification technology. Canada and US have a treaty to not use weather modification technology within the other country's airspace, but both governments use it within their own airspace upon their own people. Is human climate change the same as weather modification technology? And when Justin and Christia are spending all the money to combat human climate change, are they really saying that the money is being invested in a weather weapon against the people? If they can make it rain, if they can make it rain, they can stop the rain. If they can make a rain cloud, they can push a rain cloud. Bill Gates wants to dim the sun to combat human climate change, but there's no such thing as a chemtrail. That's a conspiracy theory. Fuck, I get so fucking frustrated. The first admission certificate from this incident, completed in Rimby, is the old Form 1 with the red tape still on it. The word must, as in the 4 criteria that must be met involuntarily to admit me under the Mental Health Act. And the one that was completed at Ponoka is the new red tape removed. Must is replaced with and or. Form 1 must be being the only word on the document that protected people's right to argument and only existed in small print in the margin. The amendments were ordered when it was found by Judge Christine Eidsvik that the admission certificates were too broad in scope and violated people's civil liberties. So the red tape, they took the must out. The must was too broad. Oh, fuck, I don't know how these people get away with this shit. Findings from the Health Advocate's Office in regards to my malfeasance and falsification of documents to commit malfeasance Mental Health Act complaint for the incident in January was investigated as not having been granted my right to copies of the admission certificates and the restraints. The time breach was supported by Alberta Health Advocate's Office, and the findings have been submitted into a larger ongoing investigation into the Mental Health Act that I'm never going to hear about, apparently. The complaint that I made to the Alberta Health Advocate's Office in relation to the second incident, using the same grounds, failure to be granted the right to the Form 1s was not supported because after the amendments, as well as must being replaced with and or, the 24 hours has been changed to in reasonable time. And 4 days in solitary confinement, drugged, cold, dirty, eating on the floor would be considered reasonable time. My complaint was not supported. Now I'm speaking to Dale again. Dale, are you starting to understand the harm your role is causing the people? The red tape you are allowing to be reduced serves to improve the system that manipulates the words to never have to be change or improve anything but the words. Accountability to those who are harmed by the red tape reduction? Absolutely not. You morons will hijack your own pick us slogans. Red tape reduction might work in the oil and gas industry, the agriculture industry, the housing and building industry to relieve the bureaucratic inflicted stress upon the people of regulatory processes and permits. But the way it is being used on the death/healthcare industry to violate people's fundamental and civil rights is nothing short of criminal. And throughout all of this, just prior to the second incarceration, it came to our attention that Wetaskiwin County is trespassing on our land with a sidewalk that was installed 13 years ago. A sidewalk that is not off the toe of the road, Highway 13, enough to be even considered as being on ditch bottom. And our property is where the back slope is supposed to be. A false fence line on the property at the time of purchase prevented us from questioning the sidewalk installation. We always knew that the county was using our land for a drainage ditch, and we always just maintained it. But since we approached them on the sidewalk trespass, we have been threatened with fines for excavating without a permit while installing a larger culvert at our own cost because the water floods our yard. Pasquin County's utility partners, Fortis and Telus, are also trespassing on our land without proper land use agreements. All three of the corporations have confirmed to me the trespass either with surveys or verbally. Fortis did 2 surveys and only provided me with one, which clearly shows the trespass of the sidewalk. But legal counsel for Fortis thinks that he can discuss only pole center as missing the property line by 0.1 of a meter or 3.94 inches. I'm not an idiot. I can read his act just as well as he can. I can measure, and I know how to figure out diameter from circumference. These poles are 47 and 48 inches in circumference and have overhead crossbars. There are 2 others also, one on the east side with an anchor approximately 5 feet from our home that is supporting the distribution transmission line that runs east to west, providing service to residents for 2 blocks. Not the line that provides service to our pole. Fortis legal counsel claims that this pole is necessary and are in that exact position to provide power to us. There is also one on Range Road 74, which coincidentally, Fortis all of a sudden started moving poles off of people's properties and all the range roads from Highway 22 west in Alder Flats this summer after I got on them about the trespass. I have photos that show the new poles standing in the ditch while the old ones are still within people's fence lines on Range Road 73. Lyle, you know Range Road 73, it's the one that your store sits on the corner of. You didn't question the 2 rows of poles and ask yourself, maybe Laureen is right. Maybe I'm screwing myself and my family. So Lyle Seeley is our Zone 7 counselor in Wetaskiwin County, and he's like the owner of Seeley's General Store here in town too. Or did you not even notice because you only see dollar signs for yourself and to hell with the rest of us? I did a ballpark figure calculation on distribution and transmission charges that have been paid since we purchased using the oldest power bill I have from 2015. It came out to a little over $16,000. Every home that is being provided power prior to our land and beyond has also paid this much for power distribution transmission. Excuse me. By the $33,333.33 that I asked for compensation for Fortis is too much, and they are not trespassing. By the way, Lyle, apparently your main responsibility is roads, which is the same thing that Neil Sarnecki said, and Neil Powell, and Brad Anderson, who told me he builds roads. What do any of you know about roads? Billy knows roads. He builds roads, and can read and survey, and can read a survey peg, Brad. He maintains and repairs roads and has 30 years, 16 of which have been operating grader with Brazeau County, where he has counselors and higher pay grade thinkers who also say that their main responsibility is roads. Engineers, lead hands, everyone within public works and hire asks his advice and knows that if you want to stop bitching about the roads in an area, send Bill there. And they think it was the act of sending Billy to fix the problem that fixed the problem. It was the same when we were building roads and leases in the oil field. I was hauling dirt. Billy was a CAD operator. Then the same consultants that wanted Billy building the roads and leases they were overseeing because he was the best they had would turn around and claim that they themselves built that road or lease. I can attest to Billy's ability, and it was I who gave Lloyd Wallachin a reference to hire Billy, as I had already worked in the county as a seasonal driver the year before. Now I am told it would be a conflict of interest to hire me to drive truck with Brazeau County. How does that work? If Billy was the kind of man who wanted to screw around on his wife with a summer student, or say another female truck driver, Brazos County would not consider that to be a conflict of interest. It would just be good gossip. You people are in charge of the complaints about the roads because you write your best mentors up for getting frustrated with ignorant, lippy little shits who walk into the highest positions as grader operator with a piece of paper saying that they have graduated road building, repairing, and maintenance, all learned on a simulator. The same type of arrogant, lippy little shits that shit drive the roads with RVs and dangerously driving vehicles, causing road damage, leading to the washboards that school buses carrying our most precious, driven by the poorest of train drivers. Seriously, I worry about the bus drivers. Next to the emergency ambulance drivers who are watching TV, the monitors, that got Billy sent to anger management for meeting the little shits challenge to a game of chicken with the grader. The county peace officers, they're addressing the complaints and generating revenue, issuing unnecessary noise fines to the young man who is riding on his aunt and uncle's private land in the middle of the day. Like that's what happened. My nephew was riding on our property, and it's like, how fucked up. How does Bart Guion is the Reeve in Brazos County. How does Bart Guion, Reeve of Brazos County, get away with using his position as and county services to fund his own personal private land development for the second time in what, 25 or 30 years? He got run off like 30 years ago from the federal government for doing exactly what he's doing again. Fuck. But he's God-fearing now, so he gets away with it. Does Bart and Brazos have a deal? Bart subdivides, develops his private property, providing future property tax for Brazos County. Providing future property tax for Brazos County. It is the act of splitting the title on quarter sections and subdividing that screw up surrounding people's land titles. And you all know it. Is this the same deal you made as Councillor Lyle? Sky Palace Tyler Chandro's shady deals before his obvious collusion in the COVID public health order harms to the people as health minister, and now the guaranteed conviction of those who now hold phantom criminal records for not complying as justice minister. Chrystia Freeland on the board of trustees with the World Economic Forum death cult. Justin Trudeau, what isn't a conflict of interest where this criminal is concerned? And don't even get me started on how much of a bonus Jason Kenney walked away with for storing his testicular fortitude in Dina Henshaw's purse. All blatant conflicts of interest that these people actually profit from, and I can't haul gravel to Billy when gravel is being hauled to his area because it would be a conflict of interest. Really? How many truck drivers has Brazos County went through since 2016 when I offered to come back and drive for them? There are still people working in public works as well as people working in the shop who know of my job performance and ability to care and maintain equipment, as well as troubleshoot possible malfunctions in the equipment I had to hire on with corrupt Canada Post Corporation team. Will Billy ever be a higher-paid great thinker? No. To begin with, he desires to be a mentor and lead by example rather than control, but mentor someone who hasn't already learned everything they need to know about operating equipment because they went to college and learned it on a simulator. It is the knowing the road knowledge that takes years of experience to obtain, starting at the bottom, thinking that he has to offer, and leadership that will be willingly followed because true honorability is easily recognized. He's not a company man. He will not be at the beck and call of the corporation, and nor should he have to earn a position of mentor or leader. Most importantly, he only has a grade 8 education, and until he met me, he didn't know he could read. And I taught him how to read a standard measuring tape. He can now read both a manual and a measuring tape well enough to build and wire our shop to code 12 years ago. We both lack the what do you want to be when you grow up indoctrination diplomas. Being the artist that he is, he also drew up blueprints for the shop on graph paper to scale, which we had to pay an engineer $1,800 to transfer to a bigger piece of paper using the blue ink, and advised us that a heavier header had to be used on the overhead doors because we wanted the doors on the eave side of the building. Permit requirements. I've copied a letter I wrote to the trespassers voicing my opinion of the permit process. I use the word encroachment, and that is probably the technicality that Wetaskiwin County's legal counsel that we are paying for is using to deny trespass, wanting us to take them to court to spend and waste more of our money. Some of the information has been changed within this body of this email because it's information that I've learned since June, the writing of this letter. Fuck, some of this information is so old. My goodness. It's terrible. Fuck. Somebody could have fucking read it a long time ago. I have done some things. So this is an email that I sent out June 28th, 2022. When I found out about the trespass. Good day. And this is going to like Mike Lake, Lyle Seeley, morons of Wetaskiwin County. Too many to name. Oh, like Fortis, Telus, all of them, all of the trespassers. I've done some thinking, some driving around the community, closely observed the power lines, transmitters, the Telus properties and structures, and lines that were put in prior to the highway in 1977. And I've spoken to a property owner on the east side of the Alder Flats, the other side of the hill, who had his property pins pulled by Wetaskiwin County during the installation of the pumped sewer service to that side of the hill. Until this installation, sewer service was only gravity flow for property owners on the west side of the hill. As well, I have spent some time on Google Earth to observe the community from above. This gentleman, Harold Makaborski, that I spoke to, informed me that his property, which also borders the sidewalk with power poles and anchors, extends into the back alley / fire lane behind his property. And this is due to the fact that Highway 13 does not run true east and west. This is blatantly obvious when one drives to the hill that Buck Lake Fast Gas sits on and drive back into Alder Flats. The paved Highway 13, which came through Alder Flats in 1979, previously Township 460, that's what I think anyways. Everybody says, well, it's out, this road in Alder Flats has always been Highway 13, but I don't know how that could be, but runs slightly east and north, starting at Highway 22 intersection until it reaches the plateau of the hill at the Alder Flats Elementary School, at which point it appears that a correction was attempted to realign the road to true east and west, but was overcorrected and the highway begins to slightly west-south. The way the power lines ease into the hamlet and then zig and zag through the hamlet in an attempt to keep the poles off the road and on the road allowance, which doesn't exist, is obvious if one looks up. The sidewalk is in the ditch bottom, no back slope on the north side of the highway, and the liquor store, post office, and the restaurant are on the ditch or back slope on the other side, on the south side of the highway. Harold also told me that Lyle Seeley is aware of the problem because his property lines are screwed up too, and he's not happy about it either. Poor counselors. Fuck. In studying the area in Google Earth, these deviations are visible. There also appears to be a slight deviation around Seagull Hill Cemetery and is corrected by the time it gets to Highway 22. The correction that was attempted going through Alder Flats could possibly likely have been to allow for the Alder Flat Cemetery, but I don't think so, because the Alder Flat Cemetery is barely off the road allowance. I was told by my dad, Virgil Dahl, a well-known road and lease builder in Alberta, that cemeteries and a certain amount of land allowance have a law about not being disturbed until 100 years have passed since the last burial, and as well, regardless of whether the burial is in a cemetery or not, as long as there is one living man or woman who knows of the burial and its location, then this land cannot be disturbed, desecrated, or developed by the government. There's a reason why the government tries to tell people they cannot bury their family members on family property. However, the cemeteries may have been taken into consideration back in the day before the highway and before the power lines and telephone lines, when it was still a township road. But it is more likely the road was just built by men who were just building roads so that people could travel between communities, as is the people's lawful right without permit. The roads were built in those days to provide the easiest access with the least amount of infrastructure. They zigged and zagged. The old Drayton Road, Range Road 73, was built in this manner and was the only road we ever traveled to come to hillbilly country, Alder Flats. To pick blueberries, there was some good moonshine made out here in those days. Burned brown sugar was added for an amber color, and whiskey bottles were used to make it look like legal alcohol. As a matter of fact, my dad may have taken part in the building of the roads leases in this area. But I also know is that back in those days, most jobs, government or oil field, were contracted with the graft of a bottle of whiskey. This still goes on. It's not just as obvious, and the bottle is now a case, a fly-in fishing trip, timeshare vacation, or possibly a pocket full of cash and a complimentary company coat. But it's probably a lot. I think small numbers, because I'm a poor woman, probably a lot fucking worse than that. The deviation of the roads for Alder Flats is obviously due to the fact that road was probably not surveyed, and the hill that Alder Flats sits on is somewhat of an optical illusion and is certainly evident on our property, which is higher in elevation than the Seagull Hill Cemetery. But it is where the natural drainage of the side hill is located. And this optical illusion to a few shots of moonshine, it's not hard to figure out how the discrepancies in property lines happened. 4th Street West, a dead-end street, which we live on, is also not running true north and south, obvious in Google Earth. This street was built as a private driveway by the previous owner of the recently legally subdivided by the owner property across the street from ours. The portion of this driveway that will be used as the access to one of the parcels on our neighbor recently legally sold does not run true on the 2nd Avenue North proposed road plan. The subdivision of this property was enabled by Lyle Seeley, who went to bat for Elaine Goldaid in her subdivision proposal to the county, which allowed her to skip the area structure plan process, because Lyle Seeley had done an extensive area structure plan to have his 60-lot legal subdivision on the property of the walking path at most proposed road plan on the 2nd Avenue North legally approved. Before Elaine Goldaid bought this property, the county of Wetaskiwin refused to snowplow or maintain in any way the 2nd Avenue North proposed road portion of this property's private driveway. And the reason being, because it was just that. And 4th Street West was not maintained past 1st Avenue North, claiming that the grader had to do this portion of the street. Thankfully, Elaine Goldaid buddied up with First Lady Kim Seeley, Lyle's wife, who owns the car wash where the show horse meetings are held. And now 4th Street West and 2nd Avenue North proposed road get somewhat maintained. We actually got a box of gravel on 4th Street West a few years back. Kim Seeley also likes to do her own complaining about how bad the county treats her at her place of business, the car wash, bottle depot, campground. In June 2005, we purchased our approach. When we purchased, our approach had a 6-inch piece of casing as a culvert and no ditch, so the drainage ran under our mobile home. I contacted the county at that time requesting a proper culvert. Darren Murphy came with track coat, culvert, November. He did a half-assed job with our new approach, with no flare out before the snow came, and never returned the next summer, as I believe he said the county would. The culvert and ditch was damaged on both ends by Rydale when the existing mobile home on Elaine's property was being moved out, as she built a new home, necessitating more Second Avenue North proposed road use as a private driveway, which the county is happy to help her out with at her beck and call. As well, the water test that had to be done on our water well in order for her to subdivide caused a lowering of our water pressure. Yeah, everybody says, no, it can't happen. Fuck me. The company doing the testing said that this wouldn't make that happen, so there's no way to prove that the sanding off of our hot water tank in the middle of winter and probable sand buildup in the pressure tank that we can't afford to replace was due to these required for legal subdivision requirements. Maybe someone will donate a good used pressure tank to us, like the hot water tank that was given to us after about 10 days without hot water because we couldn't afford to buy a new one. It's a good thing we have a legal permit for a firewood, for a wood stove. I was able to bath daily before going to the post office and get my housework done. And geez, rotating pots of water. Fuck me, I'm sick of this shit. Speaking of permits, in May of 2008, we obtained a fire permit, good for 1 month. Shortly before the long weekend of dues, these people have been fucking with Billy and I for so long. And I just put up and I just took too fucking much of it. We obtained a fire permit for a good month, good for a month, shortly before the long weekend to do some burning in the forested area on our property that is full of dead and dried diamond billow, a fire hazard. As per usual, we had a major snowfall on May long weekend, and Billy did his burning while the snow was on the ground. Unbeknownst to us, an underground fire had started in one of these willow roots and continued to burn. Early in June, a hot, dry wind, Billy is on his way home from work in Brazeau County. I had been tending to my dying uncle, Glenn Desjardins, Desjardins' needs in Rimbey, where he was receiving palliative care after he had been taken to hospital by ambulance. To EMS, who refused to help me take my uncle to the ambulance because they did not believe that the ramp that his brother, a trade carpenter, and with Billy's assistance and tested by driving our quad up and down, was safe enough for them to roll a stretcher up and down. So I pushed him down that ramp by myself to the back doors of the ambulance, across the gravel in a wheelchair. These people don't take care of anyone, and they never have. I digress. On the fire and its relevance to property pins, proposed road and road allowance. Larry Janke called 911, and Billy, who had stopped at Seeley's General on his way home to buy cigarettes. The Tasman County Volunteer Fire Department, Billy, Larry, and his son Vincent were fighting fire and pretty much had it contained. Lyle was walking around observing the fire and happenings, and numerous concerned neighbors were all sitting on our front lawn in our patio, chairs and table. For fuck's sakes. When I got home at about the same time, the forestry helicopter showed up to hover over a dry patch of willow that is approximately 1 acre in size, surrounding the grass that was almost out, and then land in the helicopter on Lyle's land to watch, but never lend help to the firefighting. Wetaskiwin County charged us $6,000 for the volunteers, of which our home insurance paid half. This was within a couple of weeks after the fire. Forestry came to do an investigation within that first couple of weeks after the fire also. I gave a statement as to what happened. The 2 forestry officers doing the investigation showed me the location of where the fire started, and I told them, no, that is not where Billy was burning weeks before, and showed them where Billy was burning and that we still had a valid permit at the time they were doing their investigation. Almost to the day, a year later, we got a bill from the forestry for another $8,000 that could not be disputed, and a written statement that was given by someone else was included as reason for being charged for the helicopter backup. The gist of that statement, Billy built a fire and then left it unattended to go buy cigarettes. The reason this fire is relevant is because there was no access to the 2nd Avenue North proposed road plan from the west, and the existing 8-foot stud pan that obstructed on the approach on the east end of the 2nd Avenue North proposed road plan. The firefighters had to come onto our property at the gate that is on the road allowance on the southeast corner of our property off of Range Road 74. But it is the only gate that is on, but it is only the gate that is on our side of this road allowance. The approach is on LeClerc's side and has always been being used as a private drive. So the firefighters had to bounce their unit through the Range Road ditch, over the concealed manhole, and across the drainage ditch that runs east to west across our property off of 1st Avenue North to get to the proposed road plan of 2nd Avenue North to fight the fire. No one on Alder Flats is provided with quality fire suppression. If fire lanes are not accessible and the water supply for fire suppression comes from a dugout at the fire station at Buck Lake, common sense to me would be for the county to make an alley, make the alleys / fire lanes accessible, and help Bill and I maintain a small, easily accessible body of water within the hamlet for fire suppression water supply that is filled by drainage that the county should be maintaining, but have never and do not, and that actually makes its way to the lagoon via natural drainage. One can dispute that it goes to the lagoon, but we are talking natural drainage off of a side hill, and the lagoon is far lower than our property. Oh, but county regulations would require a prior to fire documented legal water diversion to take water from a ditch to fight a fire that could potentially burn everyone's home down and destroy Wetaskiwin County, Fortis, TELUS infrastructure, and all that at the private property owner's expense, and no accountability to any of these corporations that are willfully encroaching private property throughout the hamlet of Alder Flats. More on this redundant middleman permit process. Much like the phantom rider charge on top of the distribution and transmission charges for power, permits are nothing more than legal skim off the top to the middleman who has nothing more to contribute than an interest in the financial transaction and expects to be paid for being interested in the transaction. Our building permit for our shop was closed as uncompleted because we had not installed a light switch by the man door. The electrical permit was the next to be obtained after the building permit that was passed. Quite some time after the shop was completed, I looked at the permits and realized that we had not received the permit pass confirmation on the original building permit. I called the inspections group, the company that provided and inspected all three permits, building, electrical, gas, and recommended by the county. The reason I was given from the young lady that we had never confirmed that the reason I was given by the young lady that was like, that we had never confirmed, she said that the pass was, she closed the permit. We had never confirmed a light switch had been installed by the man door, and so the permit was closed as having not been completed and therefore did not receive a pass. I asked her, how could that be? The next permit and inspection, also performed by the inspection group, was the electrical that passed upon inspection. Her answer was that the building permit and the electrical permit have nothing to do with each other. I asked her how she figured, this is fucking ludicrous. I asked her how she figured, this was like, I don't know, 12 years ago or something like that already, how she figured the electrical permit could have been passed if there was not a light switch at the man door. And she replied, she wasn't sure about any of that, but if I would like to send her an email stating that we had installed the light switch at the door, then she would open the permit back up and give it a proper pass. Excuse me. Now, if you are reading this and cannot see what is wrong with this legal skim off the top process, then you are probably receiving skim or graft for your own personal interest in a financial transaction somewhere. Pointing out the legal skim is only one of the reasons for mentioning the redundant permit process. Had I not taken care to ensure that all of our ducks were in a row, this failed to complete building permit requirement could have rendered the insurance on the shop null and void. Insurance, I might add, that was nearly denied to us because we did not insure the building before we started the groundwork and waited until the building actually existed before insuring it. Insuring the loss of something that doesn't exist is also legal skim. I don't know how do they get away with this shit? We had to provide photos of the belongings that would be in the shop. One of the photos was of our industrial size air compressor. Approximately a year after the shop was completed, our insurance provider contacted me by email with a photo of the air compressor attached, stating the insurance company, Johnson Insurance, wanted to know what was being stored in the big red tank in our shop. Shown in the photo. Air, it is an air compressor, was my reply, and graft and skim aside. Someone with this level of competence is the person who would decide whether they would pay out a loss on our shop and the value of the contents. Now add this incompetence to the competence level of the young lady in charge of the permits, and it's not hard to figure out why the people are so easily legally screwed by the corporations. The real problem with all of this, Billy and I seem to be the only people in Alder Flats who are not aware of the problems regarding property lines. And in the 17 years that we have been here, we have bothered no one and complained about no one, nor have we complained about the county's drainage and obliviousness to the needs of the residents of Alder Flats. The county and surrounding longtime property owners like Lyle Seeley and Al Clemmer all knew that Billy and I thought that the existing fence lines at the time of purchase was our property boundary. None of these subdivisions approvals are legal because the county approved them knowing we would not appeal them because we were ignorant of our legal property boundary. And the recent sale of one of Elaine Gold Age lots is also not a legal sale, as a legal sale went through after I legally notified the county that our property boundary was in question and had requested the county for verification back in October 2021. So now I'm going to pull my Indian card. On this 10.35 acres, there has been a birth of a burial of my immediate family members. My granddaughter, Una Lily, was born here in our home on September 5th, 2010. And I have buried my brother Killer's ashes and a small portion of Ramo's ashes also in a coffin made for Killer by Billy in my flower garden. And it is marked with Killer's own sign that says Killer's Crew, buried and marked on June 9th, 2018. There were many here to witness the burial. Our dog of 13 years, Tank, is also buried under this sign. Beside this sign is a mountain ash tree that was planted on top of Una's placenta. This garden is now sacred ground, and so is the 10.35 acres. All of this area, Alberta, is the native home to my mother's family, and I grew up on the fish, wildlife, and natural to the area berries. As well, neither my maternal grandfather, Albert Degelet, or my mother, Marie Martha Dahl, had birth certificates at my birth registration. And my birth registration signed by my mother and my daughter's birth registration that was signed by me are not valid legal documents, as neither were written in our own hand, but were typewritten by a nurse. It seems that the only encroachment issue in this community that can be easily rectified is the threat against Billy and I to remove belongings we have parked on the proposed road plan of 2nd Avenue North. But it is Billy and I and our property that sits at the bottom of the shit runs downhill that have been willfully trespassed upon, and not only by the county, Fortis, TELUS, but our so-called friends and neighbors. $100,000 is a number I come up with. This amount will pay off our mortgage, the fraudulent credit line, credit card debt, and pay for a new roof on our trailer trash mobile home. Replace our fence, allowing for utility access with the smallest amount left over to buy some much needed items. As well, Wetaskiwin County will assist with the management of the drainage and provide us property owners absence of liability for any slips, trips, or falls that may occur on the sidewalk, or hold us responsible for any snow removal or grass maintenance between our fence and the sidewalk. If the county wants to continue with their threats against us about our belongings on proposed road plan, then we as a group can all take a long, hard look at the fact that LeClerc's, well, it's a greenhouse, but I still believe that his house is kind of sitting on road allowance also, and he also has known this. I should campaign the people in my community to alert them to the class action lawsuit that the community, and I believe much of Alberta, has against Fortis, TELUS, and Alberta Government Service Corporation, which Wetaskiwin County is just one of the fingers on the hands of the legally corrupt system that is claiming to be of the people, by the people, for the people. But I'm not going to do that, because in a community this size and its addiction to social media, only one member of the community needs to be told. And apparently after 20 years, Billy and I are still outsiders and considered to be people that need to be talked about rather than people that need to be talked to. So I'm firm on my $100,000, which is a small sum compared to what it could cost Fortis to move just one pole from outside my kitchen window across the street to road allowance / fire lane. And we can't wait very long, because all our utilities, power, are going to be disconnected for arrears starting next month. Like, keep in mind, this is a year ago. It's gotten a lot worse. Like I said, I'm down to 110 now. This county sewer garbage arrears will be added to the property tax extortion, which close to half is comprised of school costs, a school whose power tripping staff with gossip and lies they believed to be true at the time led to the loss of my job at the post office 18 months ago, and a domestic violent offender with homicidal, suicidal tendencies, suffering from mental illness, personal record in the eyes of the RCMP, who feel that 2 officers and 2 cruisers are not in any way overkill to investigate our return of the renting neighbor's lawn clippings. Mischief complaint against Billy and I, but me in particular, leading to the financial state that we're in now. And how all that turned out for me is written in the letter and in my medical malpractice negligent investigation, Lyle, and also explains why I brought up the way my dying uncle and I were treated by EMS in 2008. And you can be the one member to pass this on these illegal encroachment information if you really want to be the new voice, but don't be talking to me or for me. You never have before, and I prefer you not start now. That was his campaign slogan. He's going to be the new voice. So write up your land use agreements, easements without the notwithstanding clauses. So in plain English, and cut the checks, and Bill and I will go back to our quiet life, as you said, Brent. And the Alberta Government Service Corporation of Wetaskiwin County, number 10, Fortis and TELUS, can deal with the fallout from the exposure of the trespassing on private property owners within Alder Flats and most likely all of Alberta. Bill and I have work to do, and it's being held up by not only the county, Fortis and TELUS, but also a rental occupant on an adjacent property who feels it is her right to dump on our property and then turn around and harass and complain and report how we use our property, or report who is using our property, and the county bylaw and peace officers, as well as the RCMP, that feel that her complaints are valid and need to be investigated, charges laid, or fines issued. I consider this to be undue and unwarranted harassment on the part of Wetaskiwin County bylaw and peace officers, and they're assigned to this area to address rampant rural crime, RCM coverage that we pay extra tax dollar for. But it seems an old lady with a sign, and what she does with her lawn clippings, and what she does with lawn clippings that are believed to be hers by others, are the only provable, based on believed it to be true at the time, rural crimes going on in this area, because the known criminals are still busy committing the crimes. And well, their guilt cannot be proven even with video evidence of their crimes. Fuck. So this goes on. Throughout dealing with the trespass, an error on our certificate of title and the incompetence of the Land Titles and Surveys Office has come to my attention, and the red tape that has been removed from the Land Titles Act to allow the fraudulent land titles to be placed in people's hands. as well as allowing an open door to land titles theft. And who's doing that? The professionals who know the red tape is gone? Or are they to do it like political activists like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, or the way lobbyists pay professional gather signatures from homeless for their lobbyists? My daughter is friends with a professional activist in BC, a spoiled rich Calgary, Alberta oil man's daughter, and our estranged son for the lobbyists doing just that. I'm told by Sid Sabine, lawyer, that if Billy and I know that there is an error on our land title, then we cannot sell our land. That which cannot be sold holds no monetary value, and therefore any corporation assessing our land for a comparative market value to obtain monies from us is committing fraud and extortion. Below is a copy I sent to Renee Booton, Wetaskiwin County's property tax extortionist. He disagrees with me on the land title, and I asked him how the grave affects the market value of the land title of the land. There was a long silence, and then, well, the grave can be moved by the purchaser. No, as long as there is one living man or woman who knew the man or woman who was buried in that marked grave, it cannot be moved. He claims the grave does not affect the municipality, but he can't find much information on it either. Good morning, Renee. I spoke to a realtor with High Point last week, who confirmed that if I was to inform him that there is an error on our certificate of title and then ask him to market the land, that he would not. I didn't tell him that High Point had this land for sale for a year or so before we purchased it through Moores. Fuck. or that it was Moores who owned the land when the certificate of title was split and the error was created due to Wetaskiwin County's proposed road that we were told we could use when we purchased, as long as we never placed anything permanent on it, like a sidewalk. And now have Wetaskiwin County bylaw officers threatening us with fines if we have our wheeled or on skids belongings on it. Based on this and what Laura Sitzbein told me, I know I'm correct in saying that Billy and I cannot legally put our land on the market until the certificate of title has been amended. Yes, I do realize that if Billy and I were in arrears to Wetaskiwin County for unpaid property taxes or in arrears to the TD Bank for mortgage payments, then both of these corporations would have a legal claim to a comparative market analysis. But that is not the case here. Our property taxes has been paid in full and on time, and as has been our mortgage payments since we purchased the land. I've also attached a photo of the marked grave of my brother's killer and Romo's ashes and our old canine friend of 13 years tank in my flower garden. This photo was taken on the day, June 9th, that we buried the coffin of ashes made by Billy, and shows some of the people who were here for the celebration of life afterwards. Blah, 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 the mountain ash tree. A child who was born on this land and her birth is registered with the Alberta Government Service Corporation as being born on Southwest 467 west of the 5th cannot be seen in the photo, but I assure you it's in the garden also. 100 years. When the trespass on our land, sacred Aboriginal land by Wetaskiwin County and its utility partners, Forest House, has been resolved and we receive compensation with proper land use agreements, it is then we will pay off the mortgage and apply to amend the title and add Una Lily and Demiana's names along with the easements. Why? Because the poor corporations can't force us to apply for the amendment. That must be done with our wet ink signatures, like they can extort money from us based on fraudulent paper. And it is red tape removal in the Land Titles Act that allow for the incompetence in land titles in the Land Titles Office, that the corporations get away with placing fraudulent land titles in the hands of people who are expecting an honest job done for the money they pay the professionals to handle these things for them. I don't want to put any undue stress on the system or educated professionals who work in the Land Titles Office by not having all my paperwork in order. They are 6 months to a year behind, you know. So please provide me with an amended 2022 tax assessment to reflect a comparative market analysis on the 1994 Minalta home that is in need of shingles, siding, repair, and the 10-foot piece of missing wall with a floor in-suite shower repair, flooring, cupboard facing bed. All this is the only structure that can be moved off the land and assessed for a comparative market value. I do have a deadline with this tax assessment. I can be reached at the same number you reached me at. I was refused the amended tax assessment. I was refused an amended tax assessment. It's against the regulation of his act. Now that I have brought up the topic of our granddaughters having been born on the land, I will provide the government of Alberta Service Corporation's own legal documents provided to me to use as a legal identification as attachments, along with the celebration of life photo, prove that you or people are in fact dealing with, by your own sworn oaths to a paper crown and paper crown ordered maritime admiralty corporate law, are ignoring a truly sovereign woman, free from the statutes of your acts, and most certainly free from paying anyone any more of it too. Every legal document that I have in my possession is proof of the Alberta Government Service Corporation's theft of my identity and extortion. Mothers for generations have been ignorantly signing the children that are born in hospital over to the government service corporations with the government corporate registration of their children's birth names, which is capitalized using the act of personage, a human individual person. Human is a legal medical term for the body of a man or woman, regardless of the stage in life or in death, which first came into the use in 1509, right around the same time that the scientists wanted to legally experiment on people instead of facing the criminal risk of grave robbing, as stealing the dead was the stealing from the Vatican, who had claimed all the souls on earth in God's name. Individual and person are both legal corporate terms for a man or woman. The birth registration is to be completed and signed by the mother's own hand, or her signature needs to be witnessed as being hers by an outside party that is not prepared in her own hand. The birth registration is then used to produce a legal fiction name, which is a legal corporation, and given a corporate CUSIP number, which corporate government service corporations trade on the stock market. What's worse than government trading or CUSIP numbers is that people themselves ignorantly invest and trade in their own CUSIP slavery through the investment firms or pension funds. People also ignorantly invest in organ and blood trade, or at least I hope it happens through ignorance, because the thought that people know this about the stock market and continue to profit is unfathomable to me, and this better not be where we are at in civil society. I could see the shadiness of the stock market when people started advising me to invest in RSPs to defer taxes. I always replied, that's not real. You still have to pay taxes. And then the good old, well, you can pass your RSPs on to your children. Who leaves their tax debt to their children? So I guess anyone who would think it is a good idea to leave your tax debt to your children probably wouldn't care whether money is invested as long as it's making more money. I was born on February 4th, 1965 at about 8:30 in the morning in Drayton Valley Hospital. The story my mom tells me of my birth and how I got my name goes as such. My Auntie Verna, my mom's younger sister, was pregnant and due any day also. Was looking after my three older siblings while my mom was in hospital having me. The days were passing, and mom knew she needed to go home because her sister was going into labor at any time with her first child. She said that a name for me could not be decided on, and it was a name that was needed for registration before she could leave the hospital. She decided to name me using half of my sister's name and half of one of my brother's names, Laureen and Laureen, and wished it to be spelled as such, Lorene, Barna, after my aunt, Doll. It was a nurse who typed up my birth registration record and gave it to my mom to sign. My mom was not illiterate, but she only had a grade 8 education when I was born, and she certainly did not type. It was given to my mother to sign, and she signed it with Mrs. Martha Dahl, which isn't her legal name, but is her chosen name, on February 6th. Probably without reading it because the nurse is more educated than her and used a typewriter. My cousin was born on February 9th. My mother was born in a trapper's cabin in Saskatchewan on Northeast 3062 24-3. third oldest to a family of 10, with 9 surviving to adulthood. In 1941, to Albert Desjardins, son of Hyacinth Desjardins and Laurence Indo Desjardins nee Janvier. Albert and Gertrude Desjardins nee Lindsay, daughter of Gilbert Lindsay and Mary King. Mom's maternal great-grandmother, Helen King, was the midwife who assisted the birth. It was also Helen King who completed my mother's birth registration record, as my maternal grandmother was illiterate, and signed with an X, witnessed by J. McAvoy, but it was not completed until April 11th, 1946. Grandma signed her name with X until a Canada Post worker in Hilo, Alberta, taught her to write her name because her checks could be third-party cashed at the post office using an X. I know the woman who taught my grandma to spell her name. The day and the month my mother was born could not be remembered specifically, but it was remembered as being when the frogs come out, when the frogs come out, which is around the middle of April. So the 17th of April, 1941 was chosen as a birth date for my mother. She was registered as Mary Martha Desjardins, which was amended May 2nd, 1978, to reflect her baptismal records. On January 29, 1947, she was christened Marie Martha Desjardins. She always went by the name Martha. Everyone knew her as, including my grandparents. Albert Desjardins' birth name was registered in 1977 when he was 65 years old. My parents' marriage certificate in 1957 has her being Martha Marie Desjardins, with an obvious after-the-fact set of errors indicating that the two were transposed. And I kind of remember Mom making the error, showing me how messed up her name was. Marie Martha Desjardins did not legally exist until 1978. And the name Martha Marie Desjardins may be the legal name of a woman somewhere, but it was not the legal name of my mother, who was married to Virgil Dahl for 33 years. And it was Martha that was my father's last word. My dad, Virgil Dahl, was born to Alfred and Nan Dahl, nee Nystrom of Mulhurst, Pigeon Lake. Their first homestead is where Rundle's Mission is located now. They had 12 children in total, 9 who survived to adulthood. Albert and Nan Dahl had 272 descendants in 1996. Dad's brothers built that museum in Banff, Alberta, the one the logs around it. I started school when I was 5 years old. Arlene had already taught me to spell my name, but a nun teacher insisted that I spell my name L-O-R-E-E-N. So I spelled my name Laureen until I was 14, when I wanted my driver's permit. And my mom had to apply for a copy of my birth certificate. I questioned my mom when we got it why my name spelled Laureen on this, and that's how I spell my name. That's not how I spell my name. She said that it was a nurse who wrote it that way. I began to sign my name using Laureen in grade 8. My name should be spelled L-O-R-E-N-E, the name that my mother gave me. For whatever reason, my long form birth certificate name is not capitalized, like it is on other people's birth certificate. As a matter of fact, my parents' names are also not capitalized, including the legal name Marie Martha Desjardins that did not exist until I was 13, a year before I received my birth certificate. It was probably my desire to drive that prompted the amendment to 1978, as I had been driving since I was 12. The same age I started waitressing in the Lodgepole Hotel restaurant. According to Maritime Admiralty corporate law, a ship that was christened Marie Martha Desjardins, in all caps, in 1978, walked upon the land in 1965 and gave birth, B-E-R-T-H, to a woman child that was then to a woman child that was known by family and friends as Peanut, the nickname that was given to me by my Uncle Willard and older siblings after being taken home by my father, Virgil Dahl, and my mother, Mrs. Martha Dahl. And they all sang Found a Peanut. That was a song they sang when I was a kid. It drove me nuts. I hated it. I'm still called Peanut to this day by many, Auntie Peanut to my nieces and nephews. So being called anything at all by the government and those who aim to govern is not only inappropriate and disrespectful to those who pay their wages, but calling me anti-mask, anti-vax is defaming my rightful title, anti. I'm married to William George LeClerc. I lost my place here. On December 28, 2000, the LeClerc family is huge all across Canada. Billy's great-grandfather, a craftsman, came to Alberta at the beginning of the century and either carved the doors at the legislature building or did the fancy masonry work. I'm not sure. It really doesn't matter because both are magnificent and both still stand today and were crafted by LeClerc hands, marking the LeClerc name in the creation of Alberta government history. Ships float on the water. They do not travel upon the land. LeClerc, Laureen Verna on my driver's license, because they have LeClerc in capital letters, is a forgery. I've attempted to correct it at the registry's office to reflect the birth certificate that was legally required for me to get a driver's permit in 1979 in the first place. But I am told that the system automatically populates people's names with capital letters and it cannot be changed, which I don't believe. It appears that the system automatically populates names in capital letters on birth certificates and marriage certificates as well. Yes, they incorporate our marriages as well. Unless, of course, the name belongs to a sovereign man or woman whose birth cannot be legally linked to a legally named mother. I'm not a subject of the paper crown, nor am I a subject or property of the Vatican, owners of the King's crown. As for being called a white supremacist, I will also be attaching Billy's birth registration from British Columbia in 1966. The mother must identify racial origin of the mother and father. English, Scottish, German, the following racial groups can be chosen: white, black, Indian. Billy is white by every legal definition of the law, and he is free as well as sovereign because he is in a marriage agreement with me, a free and sovereign living woman without legal fiction name. Only a stolen identity name that was then forged as a legal fiction that has been used to extort monies from me, and it is that legal fiction name that is also an error on our land title, which is in our possession, along with the mortgage, the property, tax assessment, all with the forgery of my name on it, not to mention 27 years of personal tax assessments. All have my illegal fiction name on it. I can go on and on with the paper that I have an illegal fiction name on, including the medical records. I have evidence of the crimes of those that I don't have and those that I don't have and are being withheld from me. A living woman cannot make a lifelong vow to a legal fiction person. A living woman can only make a lifelong vow to a living man, which is obviously witnessed by our marriage witnesses, lifelong friends, and justice of the peace, Evelyn Luchuk, who has known Billy, a living man, most of his life under Alberta civil law. If I married a living man under civil law, then my piece of Alberta government issue ID that has my husband name as legal fiction person is a forgery and a desecration of our marriage vows. And then I give the desecration, the act of diverting from a hallowed purpose or use, deprivation of a sacred character or office, sacrilege or profane treatment or use. Any piece of Alberta government issued ID that has placed legal fiction personage on me using my living woman name is a forgery. Any service corporation that is using a legal fiction personage, Alberta government issued ID in an attempt to legally bind us to corporate contracts is committing identity theft, fraud, and extortion for services that are owed to we the people. If we are legally governed by ancient crown laws, then where is our 50-year debt relief jubilee, Danielle? I just recently heard you bragging about how Alberta was able to repay $13 million in debt. Debt to who? Debt for what? Why does Alberta ever had debt? Danielle, I keep hearing how well Alberta is doing economically. Why are the people of Alberta not benefiting from all this money we have? There are just under 4 million people in Alberta. If the Alberta Government Service Corporation really wanted to help Albertans, then the Alberta Government Service Corporation could give every home $100,000, and the corporation's bank account would still have enough money to support the Eastern Federal parasites. Small businesses in Alberta would flourish. That money would go back into the local economy. People would be able to help themselves and pay off their own debt, relieving the stress that is killing everyone, thereby relieving the stress on the healthcare system that apparently is our biggest concern and is using up so much money. People wouldn't have to be begging for handouts from the corporation. The corporation wouldn't have to spend so much money on creating an infrastructure to take care of the underprivileged, because there wouldn't be any underprivileged, thereby eliminating the vast divide between the over and the underprivileged, eliminating many of the social upheavals. Seriously, billions, trillions of dollars on a daily basis gone. Gone where? Nobody knows. Nobody has to answer for not knowing. Those of us who can't afford a home, groceries, fuel, utilities, insurance, interest, and tax on all of it, knowing for fucking sure that we are not getting any of it. No, we are the ones who are providing it. We have no choice in the matter. I don't get to decide whether or not I, who has never caused anyone mental or physical harm, should keep my money rather than pay those who mentally and physically harmed me. Not that I have any money. I'm no longer functional in the world as a whole. And I suffer from anti-mask, overvalued ideas of personal freedoms. Billy has the stress of trying to financially support me as well as himself. That is how fucking bad it has gotten, people. A man who has worked and paid his taxes for 40 plus years cannot afford to financially support his wife, who also worked 40 plus years and paid taxes, because a bunch of power-tripping bureaucrats, rats in capital letters, figure they are smarter than those of us who didn't receive the education that they owed to us. They deserve all the money because we, the people, would spend it foolishly in all of our ignorance. There are a lot of people in Canada who know about the paper crown, including the Honorable Brian Peckford, the last living man that signed the paper constitution in 1982, but continues to claim our rights and sovereignty under God. There are people all over the world who are learning about the paper crown and who are reclaiming their names in countries, and the paper crown knows it as soon has to free the slaves or find another way to legally own them. Inject a non-organic corporation patented substance into bodies of humans to maintain proof of ownership with the digital IDs that links the human's body to a corporate patent. I've listened to many of these people on podcasts, and no one talks about having a birth certificate without the capital letters. I am somewhat of an anomaly, is what they tell me. If you think that those that rule by law then practice the rule rather than practice the rule of law wouldn't take part in such a deception, then apply for your birth certificate, birth registration record, and your long form birth certificate. It'll cost you $80. All mothers ignorantly signed our children over to the corporation. We had to, or our babies wouldn't receive health care. We wouldn't receive family allowance, child tax benefit checks. We ignorantly sold our babies to the system. Extortion. The Alberta Government Service Corporation expects me to renew my driver's license by the 4th of February. I know that this document is a forgery. Who would be breaking the law? Me for not being ignorant of the law, knowing that I, a woman, can travel upon the land without permit and not paying the $90 to renew a document that I know is a forgery? Or the Government of Alberta Service Corporation for requiring me to renew a document that I know and can prove is a forgery? Because you got to know the registry's office would renew regardless of whether or not I showed them that the mother's name on my birth registration did not legally exist at the time of my birth. The registry office wants the $90. They don't know, they don't care why my name is capital letters on all the legal documents that were all created using my birth certificate as proof of who I am and how my name should appear on all legal documents using upper and lowercase letters. When I first learned to write my letters in alphabet, I learned to write capital letters first. Why and when did we stop calling them capital letters? Using the ancient paper crown laws It is those who are sovereign who speak to the paper crown and then speak to the people, and vice versa. Now, unless any of you can prove your sovereignty from the paper crown ordered maritime admiralty corporate law with a legal birth certificate free from legal fiction personage, then you are in our room, regardless of what room you are acting fraudulently in. And in the words of Una Lilly, born Southwest 446-7, west of the 5th, get out of our room, you're stinking it up. That's just a private little story between my family. My baby's so cute. I'm sure there must be other free and sovereign people in Canada other than my family members, but they are ignorant to the fact, like my family members are. You can all stand with me and use my legal freedom to free yourselves from your paper crown oaths, thereby freeing all the people of Alberta, possibly Canada, or you can continue on with your WEF-WHO UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda that Harper signed us all onto. But it is you who will be responsible for the future enslavement of your descendants, and we all have to pass judgment upon our own souls for the decisions and actions we make in life. To finish off, if anyone is wondering why there is so much gang-related crimes that seem to be increasing and the bad guys are never caught, it is because the government of Canada Service Corporation is the crime syndicate. Justin is the syndicate boss. All the government of Canada, Crown Service Corporations, Air Canada, Royal Canada, Canadian Mounted Service, Police Service Corporation, Canada Post Corporation, Paladin Security, FinTrack, Pornhub are the tools used to carry out the crimes. One can dispute such a claim, but you have to ask yourself why people going about their everyday lives who are on camera everywhere we go, every financial transaction we make can be tracked back to us. Our vehicles, our cell phones are tracked and traced. But the bad guys who are supposedly amongst the people, they're never caught. One only has to work with Canada Post for a little while, paying close attention, and then fly into Vancouver Airport and see the Air Canada terminal and Canada Post terminal side by side to see how the online telephone fraud and extortion, identity theft, unauthorized and or controlled by Health Canada pesticides and other dangerous substances, contraband, tobacco, medical narcotics, sold as street drugs, the weapons, the ammo, the missing children for sexual sale could be easily transported from place to place in vehicles that never get stopped or routinely searched by the RCMP to figure out why the bad guys never get caught. Mail-in voter cards, I can tell you exactly how that fucking happens. Not all people working for these corporations are bad people, but there are some really slimy actors, Justin, at the top of all these corporations that are bad, and they're hurting and killing people with the intent to do so. These criminals get away with it because people are scared of losing their jobs or maybe even their lives for speaking up. However, if you know of one of these slimy actors, in your organization, and shit. And do not speak up and stand up, then you are complicit in your crimes. And if you're wondering what I am expecting, I'm blocked off here. I can't get past that. Anyways, if you're wondering what I'm expecting from this communication, it's a journey of living men and women who will defy their paper crown nose and I don't know, I can't see this last, doesn't matter. Fuck, sick of this shit. Anyways, I'm done. That's it. Anyways, the land title fraud, I got 100 years proof of that. It's the torrent system. Alberta does have the torrent system of land titles fraud. The torrent system consists of 3 principles. First principle is the curtain. No, the mirror principle. The mirror principle is that all the liars, the real estate liars, the real estate agents, the counties, everybody that's involved in real estate, they all in layman's terms, they all agree that the title that's in the current title that's in that land titles office at that time, at this time, is current and valid and subsisting. And then the next principle is the mirror principle. And mirror principle is that because all the lawyers, they all agree that that piece of paper that's in the land titles office in Edmonton is valid and subsisting, because they all agree on that, then they never know that. The mirror is the one they all agree on. The curtain is because they all agree on the mirror, then they never have to look behind the curtain and do an actual historical land title search. And I've done that. And there's not one legally written land title on this quarter section. And I can teach you guys all about that, but